Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Eng Lang Pro YouTube channel. If it's your first time here, welcome. My name is Tori. We're a team of recently graduated EngLang students. We know it's a really hard subject to learn and a very difficult subject to teach. So we're here to help provide some supplemental teaching for you guys to make sure you get the absolute most out of this subject as you can. So today I'm going to be teaching you guys a little bit about how to approach your area of study 2 in Unit 4 identity essays. So one thing I will let you guys know is that I've got this Google Drive that you guys can all access. It'll be linked in the description box below. So these are just the essay topics all the way from 2016 to 2023. It's just screenshots. So this is just really for when you guys are focusing mostly on essay and just want to do isolated essay practice stuff. You can just grab a topic from there. That's what we'll be doing today as well. I've got 3 prompts that we'll go through and I'll let you know how I approach them. But first, let's do a bit of a step-by-step. So as always, number 1 is about really knowing your stuff in the first place. So content-wise, English language is a pretty unique subject in that there's not as set in stone notes that you can take. It's much more almost a research-based subject. There's a lot of your own personal time and energy that you need to dedicate towards finding out things about topics if you want to excel at the essay section. And here are the dot points from the study design. So let's go through them. And as we do, I'll note down a few ideas that I think are worthwhile you guys having a bit more of a look at. So for the first one, social and personal variation, i.e. sociolects and idiolects, idio meaning personal or own and social meaning social, in language according to factors such as age, gender, sexuality, occupation, interests, aspiration, and education. So those are the 7 features that are listed specifically in the study design and are therefore definitely worth having a look at. So number 1, let's look at age. So age-related language. If you guys are doing research on some older things, you might see it as teen speak, as was specified in the old study design. But just go with age-related language now and specify which age group you're talking about. A lot of the times you're talking about something like slang, and the purpose of that is, and as with each of these factors, is really to create in-group membership or build solidarity. And this one in particular, age-related language, is an extremely easy one to find quotes, contemporary examples, anecdotes about, because you guys are all within that exact age range that where neologisms and all these new slang terms are prolific because you're trying to establish your own identity. So think about how this is to create divide between the current teens and the generation before them. There's always constantly this kind of manufactured idea that there's beef almost between generations. So think about why we have such a fierce sort of love and respect for the people within our in-group. Because we know them, because we're like them. We can see ourselves in them. So, of course, we want to show that we're proud of that in the way that we speak. That's what the entirety of Area Study 2 is about, is how is our language affected by which in-groups we're a part of, or what our own intrinsic values and belief systems are. So idiolects, meaning personal own, that's more to do with personal beliefs and values. But of course, that's going to be affected by the people you grow up with, by the people around you. So remember that sociolects and dialects are very much intertwined ideas. Then we've got next gender. So genderlects, I extremely recommend you have a look at. There's lots of research going into differences between someone's presenting gender and how they speak. For example, you guys might have heard of high rising terminal in terms of the Australian accent, which is part of Area Study 1 and Unit 4. But apparently with women, they're more likely to have a rising intonation at the end of statements in order to kind of express uncertainty and have more hedging statements or hedging phrases in speaking as well. And that reflects the historical idea that women have less of a right to speak their ideas, or their opinions are less worthy. So it's really interesting how society has affected the way that we speak to this day. So please do have a look at rising intonation and hedging. In fact, I'll go find a paper right now. So here are a few things worth reading about. So here in the unheard female voice, women are more likely to be talked over and unheeded. It's a great article worth reading. But they've got a small section on upspeak. It's more common in women, it says, and each sentence upward inflection conveys uncertainty, which makes sense if you think about it. We classically have rising intonation at the end of questions. So it makes sense that with uptalk, it seems that we are conveying some sort of uncertainty. There's a lot here on vocal fry as well, which is a different sort of physiological it's to do with the creation of the sound itself, so more phonetics. So definitely have a read. It's worth going into the rabbit hole over. And here's a Journal of Voice article. It raises a few questions. The study itself is more to do with recognition of certain sounds, so not relevant to this particular area of study, but it's asking a few questions about why. So it's been shown that female speakers often speak in vocal fry and uptalk. Why are the responses to this negative? What is the cultural, sociolinguistic, and peer pressure that sort of features that affect this or create this sort of negative effect? So I'll link these as well in the description below. So moving on now to the next one, we've got sexuality. Great. So let's do a bit of research on that. So there is so much here. I just did a bit of a Google search and seriously recommend you guys go do your own research, learn about this. Language and sexuality. So basically it's sexuality, you can kind of discuss it in different ways. You can talk about how you could even link it to taboo topics, PC language. But basically here we're talking about how one's own sexuality then contributes to the way that they express themselves. But not only that, but also how queer linguistics has affected society, or how heteronormative practices and heteronormative language is now changing to better reflect a variety of sexualities. So, for example, the idea that husband and wife is a very heteronormative idea and implies a heteronormative relationship. So we've come up with all these new terms that help describe everyone a little bit more accurately. But of course, that is a very contested subject and continues to be contested. So have a look and find contemporary examples about this as well. You could discuss, for example, how sexuality has certain linguistic practices and how they might be adopted by people outside the queer community. So there has been a bit of discourse about certain words becoming slurs. So that would be what sort of semantic change? It would be a deterioration. So all of this links together. Stuff from year 11 links together as well. So definitely worth having a look into. Next one we've got is occupation, which is one of the easier ones. Pretty much very much to do with, so we're talking about sociolects a lot here. So social class is very relevant here, and jargon is a huge linguistic feature relevant to occupation. So find an example and maybe even a quote and practice analyzing it in terms of jargon. How does this reflect someone's social class? How is this defining their in-group? How is this alienating people outside of that in-group? Interests, aspirations. And I might put education up here with occupation, because education and occupation are very similar because they're discussing social class, and interests and aspirations can also be quite jargonistic. So jargon, any sort of field of expertise, a field that can have expertise will have terms that are specific to that field that you won't understand outside of it. So interests and aspirations can also include jargon, but also consider how this how someone's interests and aspirations, how could that reflect how they speak? One of those ways could be, for example, if you're attempting to assimilate into a new sort of social group. So your aspirations and interests are involved in a group that you aren't necessarily born into, whether that be an interest group, a hobby group, or even like a social class that you weren't necessarily already given access to. So you might adopt phrases that are seen with covert prestige within that group, and act a certain way in order to appear favorable and become a part of that in-group. So lots to think about there. So that's just the first dot point. Let's move on. Representations of individual and group identities in a range of texts. So this is where you guys need to take initiative, have a look at a range of texts, and hopefully you will during your school year. And at the back of your mind, you should always be thinking, how is this character represented through their language? And what about their group identity? The ways in which the language of individuals and the language of groups is shaped by social expectations and community attitudes. So this is very much where we're talking a bit about prescriptivism and descriptivism. So worth reading up on that. And this could also be an essay topic that you could link towards a bit of Unit 3 stuff as well. So remember, you're not going to be given an essay prompt that says talk about Unit 2 of Unit 4 AOS 2 only. You're given a very broad prompt where you can talk about anything that you've learned about over the past year. So prescriptivism and descriptivism very much links back to what we've already learnt about, and also can link towards things like standard and non-standard English, which is a bit closer to Unit 3 stuff. And then drawing more on community attitudes, overt and covert norms. So this is a really, really huge topic. Go watch our video on that. Yeah, huge topic, but basically manipulating those covert and overt norms, like mentioned before up here with interests and aspirations, you can manipulate that in order to be perceived favorably by whichever in-group you're trying to become a part of. Code switching as means of demonstrating group membership and belonging. So whether that means switching up your formality, your actual language, code switching is a huge and quite an obvious, hopefully, if you're given a transcript, for example, if we're talking about AC stuff, code switching should be really obvious to you. And I recommend finding a contemporary example as well, whether that be an anecdote, go for it, but something like a recipe that includes a Greek word or something like that could be very helpful, and you can talk about how that is included in order to celebrate the group membership and celebrate the fact that different languages will have different words for different things due to their culture and the fact that some things don't exist in different cultures. The relationship between social attitudes and language choices, the language to discuss representations of identity in text. So I think this is actually another dot point. Oopsies. So the last one, hopefully you'll pick up as you go. And social attitudes and language choices is very much part of the previous dot points on covert overt norms and prescriptivism and descriptivism. So those are the study design dot points. Let's go on to step 2. So this is almost, kind of what we talked about before, but you should be researching and brainstorming some of these key themes. So social personal variations we've talked about, individual identity, which is part of what we've talked about up there as well, overt covert norms, in-group and exclusion, societal attitudes, so prescriptivism, descriptivism, even any sort of signs of racism in language. Pick that up, write that down, you're going to talk about it. Overt covert norms I've got twice, that's how important it is. Standard versus non-standard, prescriptivism, descriptivism, why parts of our language are changing. So egalitarianism, PC language, woke language, that's all very relevant here. What makes Australian English unique? This is all a bit more of Area Study 1, but I've included it anyway because if you get an identity topic, you're unlikely to just be focusing on Area Study 2, but you'll have a look at some of this as well. once you've done all that kind of brainstorming, and I've got some examples of my brainstorming here, you should also, as you go along, be looking for contemporary examples and quotes. So here's my kind of area study to brainstorm. So it's got contemporary examples from Reddit here. These are 3 sort of paragraph ideas that I was brainstorming about. A New York Times article, some quotes down here. DC stands for David Crystal, very famous linguist that you're probably quoting quite a lot. And then up here, I've kind of got my brainstorm for society's attitude to language. So PC language, connotations, standardizations, overt, covert, prestige were the 4 kind of ideas that I came up with in year 12. Here I've got quotes from some books, and another Goddard 2002 discusses how companies spend so much on finding right brand names to trigger desired connotation. There you go. So maybe that's a paper that I was reading. So some ideas were being put down. It's far from an actual essay, but they're ideas. And here as well, I've got a little bit, just some more quotes, just a list of them, and some inclusive language ideas for an essay. So 1, 2, 3, you want to have 3 paragraphs in your essay, if not more. And I'm labeling each contemporary example, quote, an anecdote, whatever I've got here, with where I would put them in my paragraphs. So on the previous page, I had my paragraph ideas, and now I've numbered these. What sort of, where would these pieces of evidence go in my paragraphs? So that's kind of an example of how I would go about it. Now, number 4 is to practice, unfortunately. Easier said than done, but let's do some now. So, yeah, okay, this is very area study too. So, now I did warn you guys it was low quality, I hope. When interacting with others, we make deliberate language choices that reveal elements of our social and individual identities. Okay, deliberate. Okay, number 1, I'm thinking about deliberate language choices. My first paragraph is going to be, no, it's actually unconscious. So as I go through my prompt, I'm thinking about, where can I be the most contrarian? Where can I pick up a talking point that reveal elements of our social and individual identities? Well, I do actually agree with most of that. So number 1 is going to be about it being unconscious, and then interacting with others. So interaction, I'm thinking a bit about politeness theory, because people want to come across a certain way. And then number 3 is just going to be my jargon, slang, age-related language, in-group membership paragraph. So I've already kind of got a bit of an understanding about what paragraphs I'm going to write, because jargon slang was a paragraph I wrote a lot in year 12. So I knew I had a quote. I had a Kate Burridge quote there, so I'll put KB. And I had an anecdote, but I would recommend you guys find slang or jargon that's not an anecdote. And I did have a budget quote for jargon. Politeness theory, I'm going to mention the 1978, if I'm not mistaken, Bren Levinson's theory, which I've done a video on, so check that out. The politeness theory, and then what else can I talk about? I could talk about sexual identity theory, which is Tajfel. Tajfel, and I can't remember the year, but have a look. It's a bit less linguistics based and more psychology based, so you can talk about it, but I wouldn't focus too much. And I'm a little bit wanting for more ideas, so let's go look at the stimulus material. Can't anyone text without graphics and emojis? Seriously, 5,000 years of written language and we revert to pictograms. All right. Yes. Oh, now I've got lots of ideas about e-speak, and I'm going to put them in my 3rd paragraph. E-speak. I've got a David Crystal quote on that. I could talk about stimulus A, but I've already got so much e-speak examples that I can use. Many of the people who approach the ombudsman are upset because of the way the authority responded to their concerns. A genuine apology. Okay. So that's quite politeness theory core, but I'll leave that for a bit. It's a bit hard. If it doesn't start ringing bells immediately, don't spend too much time trying to work a stimulus material into your argument. Just move on. You don't need to include more than one or two. Linguistic analysis of AFL post-match interviews has shown players follow a strict pattern, avoid being overly positive, avoid being overly negative because it's perceived as weak. There you go. So I wonder, this one doesn't say that it's unconscious or conscious, but definitely to do with coming across a certain way. So that could be under politeness theory. Politeness theory is not, I'm not going to just talk about politeness theory. It's more to do with how I'm coming across in this paragraph. So I might talk about stimulus C. I think that raises a lot of interesting points. And then when I sat down to watch the Australian drama Bump, I was so excited to hear the term use. I've never heard that. Okay, US, New Zealand, all right, makes you feel accepted. Okay, I mean, I guess that could go in my third paragraph. But first, I haven't got anything for the fact that it's unconscious. So I could talk about politeness theory and the fact that a lot of it is not, I mean, you're not going to consciously think about changing the way you speak a lot of the time. But I'm wondering if maybe that's not the best way to go anymore because I can't think of any examples, which is unfortunate. Unless I made up an anecdote, but even then, I don't have enough evidence to argue that it's an unconscious change. So instead, I'm going to take some of the many ideas that I have in 2 and 3 and make another paragraph out of that. And that's what I do in the actual exam if I didn't have evidence. But you guys have the luxury of having the time and the open book ability to go and do research. So what I would do now if I were you guys is take this prompt. I've thrown a few ideas out there. You should have a look, see what you guys would write in your 3 paragraphs, do some research, find your contemporary examples, and then, you can write it or you can't, up to you, but it's the research that's important. And this is the most fun way to do all of step 1 through 4, is to start with the prompt first with no ideas at all, and then do research for how would you write if you had this essay in the final exam, but you could use the internet and you could use open book. Because that will, with practice, those will start to become ingrained in your memory anyway. So let me upload this photo. Okay, so here's what I was talking through as I was writing down. So that was my first idea. In retrospect, it wasn't that good. I still think it could be great if I had the time and Google to have a look at how different language choices around people are unconscious. So I recommend doing that. But my second paragraph on how we manipulate it in terms of politeness theory, social identity theory, stimulus C is going to be in that one. And then my third paragraph on basically personal lexical choice, so jargon, slang. I've got a quote from Kate Burridge and David Crystal on eSpeak. So I might be talking about age-related language there. So Anek is for anecdote, and then budget was some of my jargon that I had. So then I decided that I wanted to take some of my examples from 2 and 3 and make 3 paragraphs out of those 2 because I was under time pressure and in the exam. But you guys have the luxury of writing a much better essay because you can go and plan it properly. So I hope that has been helpful. This will all be linked down below, and all the best for the rest of your study.